Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Alistair Platt. I'm the Director of Business Development at RSL Awards, and I'm joined by my classically trained pianist colleague, Daniel Francis, who is the Head of UK Sales and Partnerships, well, the UK and Republic of Ireland, for that matter, who, as I mentioned, is going to do most of the talking because he knows this stuff much better than I do. But I hope what you're going to see today is a breath of fresh air in the world of classical piano in terms of graded syllabuses. And we welcome any questions that you may have along the way. We'll have a look at the repertoire at each grade and trying to focus in on the sort of skills development that's happening in our progressive mastery framework, and how the technical exercises sort of underpin all of this and integrate with the performance pieces. This year has been a pretty epic year for everybody involved, and nonetheless with us at RSL Awards. But we have seen this disruption as an opportunity to innovate, and we have made all sorts of progress in the last sort of 6-7 months, including digitizing assessment, digitizing more materials, giving different types of access to our materials. We've digitized the mark sheets as well and refined assessment criteria. And now with this expansion into classical repertoire, where we've really come from a contemporary background, makes a considerable strategic kind of change and step forward for our organization as a whole over the year. And I hope you'll be able to see that. We will talk about how you can use this classical piano syllabus in terms of assessment and exam formats and things as we go through. But for now, let me turn over the microphone to Dan.
Thanks, Alistair. Great to see everybody here this afternoon. This slide here, for anybody who missed the presentation, wasn't around for the presentation on Monday, where we gave a general overview, highlights what we were trying to achieve with the RSL Classical Syllabus, which Alistair has just referenced. We wanted to make sure that it was engaging, informative, academically rigorous, and was relevant to students who are in the 21st century musicians now, that are either going to be musical hobbyists or indeed go and work in the creative industries as a whole. To that end, it was important that that we actively highlighted and celebrated composers from a diverse range of backgrounds. So you'll see that there's a broad range of composers working in a variety of cultural contexts, who are drawing on both the Western classical and jazz traditions in their work. Likewise, this is coupled with the composers you would sort of expect to see in a classical repertoire, really, that are representative of the evolution of both Western classical music and jazz from its earliest stage, from the Baroque era all the way through to present day. And within that, you get 10 pieces in the syllabus that cover kind of Western classical tradition, jazz tradition, and contemporary classical repertoire. So students can jump on top of pieces of music that they really enjoy, that they can engage with, but it also gives them a really important opportunity to explore, discuss, and formulate their own informed opinions as to the historical and sociological and cultural context in which all this music has been and is being written. On top of that, of course, they can get a globally recognised qualification, either through performing 5 pieces, which will give them the performance certificate, carries UCAS points from grade 6 to 8, which is really important. Or, of course, they can do the graded music exam, which will be the traditional exam people are very familiar with, which is 3 pieces, and then technical exercises. They have the choice with the unseen test between sight reading or interpretation and improvisation. And then there's ear tests and general musicianship questions. And just as a relevant aside, I suppose, when it comes to the performance certificate, 3 pieces can be free choice pieces from anywhere else, including from the Rock School Contemporary Piano syllabus. Within the graded music exam format, 2 of those can be free choice pieces. And we have worked very hard to make sure that the benchmarking, the sort of skills and understanding that students need to have to access the contemporary rock school piano syllabus are mapped across with the RSL Classical syllabus, as well, of course, as other exam boards, so that everybody knows that a grade 3 piano player is a grade 3 piano player. The fundamental difference is that the styles that are covered in the contemporary piano syllabus are kind of rock and pop and film and TV and some jazz styles as well, and require students to play as soloists, but also along to a backing track. Whereas with the RSL Classical syllabus, there are no backing tracks, but you get exemplar audio of the recordings, and of course they have very much a focus on the sort of skills required to be a classical musician, generally being able to play as a soloist. So with the RSL Classical and the Rock School Contemporary, you have there a choice of two syllabuses where you can kind of mix and match between the two to ensure that the exam that the student enters is preparing them for the kind of the musical world that they want to operate in. And you have that opportunity. The technical exercises in the RSL Classical are very similar to the Rock School Contemporary syllabus in terms of the scales and the arpeggios. The technical studies have been adapted, so they're classical rather than the contemporary rock and pop styles. And we've removed the chord voicings because that's very much a kind of an ensemble reading from a lead sheet contemporary approach, which if they want to do that, they can go down the contemporary approach rather than the RSL Classical. The interpretation and improvisation exercises are exactly the same across both syllabuses. And the ear tests focus on melodic recall. And the general musicianship questions will be similar, but obviously, designed to assess a student's ability to understand and talk about the piece of music that they have been studying. As an addition, all the way through until 2021, students can actually enter a rock school, an RSL Classical Piano exam using any piece from any other regulated awarding body. So the performance certificate, they could pull together all the classical pieces they've been working on towards an exam, which they've so far been unable to do because of the pandemic. We're in a position where we can do exams. So students can take those pieces of music and enter their performance certificate straight away this side of Christmas. More about that later on. With the graded music exam, they also have that opportunity because they can take 3 pieces from any other regulated exam board. But then all they need to do is download the tech exercises and prepare the sight reading, ear test and general musicianship questions that are on our website. It's really quite a straightforward process, and hopefully one you'll really enjoy engaging with. But for now, let's look at the debut syllabus. Now, if you've downloaded the repertoire list, you'll already be able to see. You'll have had a look at these pieces of music and see how representative we believe it is, covering traditional spiritual with Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, all the way through via Bartók and Debussy and Einaudi, 2 pieces of music that have been written for film and TV, Jan Tiersen's Vals d'Amélie, and also contemporary piece of music written, by male and female composers, which was a very important thing to include as well. So let's have a look at this very famous Clair de Lune by Debussy, a classic impressionist composer. His focus on the tonal palette and the use of instrumentation to create particular impressions in the same way that Monet did in his own, artwork, meant that Debussy was really stretching the boundaries of Western classical structures and tonality and harmony. Quite a challenge to look at the kind of the extended tonality and harmony at debut level, because students don't have that level of understanding. So this is a very carefully arranged version of the original, where we've benchmarked it to particular debut criteria, which you can see on the right hand side, where you've got really quite a straightforward simple time signature, 3/4 and 4/4 key signature. Doesn't really go beyond C major and A minor. There is a G major in there as well. Dynamics and articulation aren't something we're particularly concerned with at this level, and the technical demand, as hopefully you can see, is relatively limited. There's very little kind of change of hand position once you start playing. The movement at any point tends to only be in one hand, and the triads are really quite simple. Obviously, there are little accidentals, but we think at this sort of tempo, moving between a G to an A flat, and then of course down here the chromatic move from A, G sharp, and G is quite straightforward. Just looking at bar 11 and 12, where you can see that looks like there's a bit of a leap there. Actually, while it's written in the treble clef and then the bass clef, the movement there is really limited. I mean, it's not even an octave; it's a very subtle change of hand position, but written in treble clef and the bass clef to make it very, very clear to the student, make it very easy for them to read. So let's have a listen to this. This is the exemplar audio you get with the book when you download, you enter the download code that comes with the book, or indeed it's embedded into Replay as well, but more about that later. This gives you an example of the sort of thing we're looking for, and it means the student can immediately engage both visually and orally with the music that they're being asked to play. So a nice gentle start to proceedings this afternoon. Contrasts significantly with Martian's March, which a number of you may be familiar with if you've engaged with the Piano Time series, which was Pauline Hall's series that evolved from her writing tunes that were designed to, in her words, engage even the slowest of learners. So she was very keen to ensure that the music that was around was written to suit beginner players. So we've obviously drawn on that and incorporated it into the RSL syllabus. What I want to draw your attention to are the scales that are required in the debut syllabus. The Group A scales here, simply C major and A natural minor. The beats per minute indicated as well, 52 BPM. That increases incrementally as you go through the exams. But what I wanted to highlight was obviously the way the C major scale obviously relates directly across to what they need to be able to play in this piece of music. And you'll also see in a minute the broken chords that are incorporated, and you'll see there's an element of that. If they can play this piece of music and play the broken chords, they're going to be well on their way. And of course the tail end of the Debussy had a similar sort of flavour, but you can see the descending C major scale written into left hand here, and indeed the right hand over here, and then you've got a nice little F sharp. It gives an opportunity for students to begin to familiarise themselves with the concept of moving into a new key. So we've got D major going to G, which then revolves back to C major, which is a part of functional harmony that is embedded into a lot of pop music and of course classical music. And so that becomes a bit of a theme as we go through. Let's have a listen to Pauline Hall's Martian's March, and listening out for the entertaining kind of big note cluster end, which I think a lot of students, particularly at debut level, will really enjoy playing. And obviously, with the exception of that entertaining chord at the end, you can see and hear how the hand position is quite straightforward, and it's a fairly steady tempo and fairly straightforward, consistent one type of articulation all the way through. Let's contrast that with Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which is a very, very famous spiritual or folk song. No one's quite sure when it was written, but around the 1850s. Obviously, the lyrics referencing and really highlighting all the issues around slavery and emancipation. Gives you a good opportunity to talk about that, and how this in itself led on to the development of blues and into jazz, and then ultimately into pop, and then directly references our contemporary rock school syllabus as well. One of the key things here, again, obviously it's been arranged specifically for this standard of player, but we've also got great bars 3 to 10. I've got that chorus flavour, and then you've got these call and response figurations, which are typical of spirituals, of blues, and of course pop. And then, of course, you can reference that and use that as a route to talk about question and answer in imitation and classical music as well. And want to highlight as well that we have unashamedly included pentatonic scales in the classical syllabus. Pentatonic scale isn't something that is necessarily associated with the Western classical tradition, but you will find that there are countless examples of the pentatonic scale being used in pieces of music, particularly amongst composers that were incorporating folk music into their work, such as the second movement of Dvorak's New World Symphony. There's a piece of music by Bartók later on, and of course the pentatonic scale used in this piece of music here, and you'll see later on there's examples of the blues scale used as well, which is just a subtle variation of the pentatonic. So let's have a listen, and what I particularly want to draw your attention to is the fact that the right hand takes the melody, but then that's swapped over into the left hand towards the second half of the piece, A, to create interest, but B, to ensure that both hands are kind of developing their technical facility to both play accompaniment and melodic figures. So let's have a quick listen. Lovely. And a note on the technical exercises, as mentioned before, C major and A minor are the two scales, and that's double with pentatonic as well, and with the broken chords. And then you've got an example of the technical studies on the right hand side. Now, within the classical syllabus, at each level, there are 3 technical studies, each of which are covering a slightly different style of music. And then the candidates select one of those to prepare. With the debut, they can play their scales and the broken chords with the book, and the technical studies with the book. By the time you get to grade 1, the use of the book is not allowed for the scales and arpeggios. It needs to be done from memory, but throughout grades 1 through to grade 8, you can use the book to do your technical study. Let's look at the grade 1 now. You can see again the range of composers that we've got. Ignatius Sancho was one we talked about at the webinar on Monday. You're going to hear in a minute traditional Chinese tune, Jasmine Flower, and there's stuff from Frozen as well. So you can see there's a really interesting range of composers and styles incorporated. On Monday's webinar, we talked about the Powell Perry or an Echo as well, which is a fantastic piece which kind of merges Western classical tradition and the jazz traditions together, as is so often seen in 21st century contemporary classical music. Let's look at all this found. Just as an example of how this is showing a bit of a development from debut, you can see there's a little bit more articulation, some more ornamentation going on with the pauses. This is giving more of a focus on style and expression. We've now got the key signatures including 1 flat and 1 sharp. And this is a nice little rule to remember, that at each grade 1 is 1 sharp and flat, grade 2 is 2 sharps and flats, etc., etc. In the notes on the right hand side, flagged up that this piece of music in the film is designed to be a lullaby where the mother is singing to her two children. And that's the sort of style that you want to encourage the student to be able to put across as they're developing their ability here. Generally speaking, in the grade 1 syllabus, you'll find that the left hand ordinarily focuses on creating the accompaniment while the right hand plays the melody. There is a little bit more repositioning of the hands as the melodies get more complicated and the harmonies and the accompaniments get more complicated, but there's time given to do that either by the distance between the notes into the duration or indeed the tempo of the piece itself. And you'll find that generally speaking the accompaniments are simple triads. So let's have a listen to the beginning of this and then we'll move on to some other pieces. And if you know Frozen at all, you'll hear lots of what we call sort of sonnet logos or leitmotifs in there that are kind of that you'll hear in a lot of the pieces from a lot of the music from Frozen 1 as well. I'd only just managed to get it out of my head. It's now back in again, so that's great news. Let's look at a classic piece from Western classical tradition, Jupiter from Holst Planets. This is a specially written piano arrangement of the orchestral suite. I would always recommend that students go and listen to a reference recording of the orchestral version and hear how this particular melody fits into the wider piece that is Jupiter. Technically, it doesn't necessarily look significantly more difficult than debut, but it's worth highlighting that it's now a longer extract. That's one of the things that comes through as you go through, that the piece of music may be quite short, but they'll have certain levels of demand. Other pieces will be longer, and it's a student's ability to play for an extended period of time and learn longer pieces of music that is also part of the skill. So where we've got in the earlier grades, particularly a slightly longer piece of music, you'll also find that there's repetition built in, so that students can start to recognise those different patterns, understand the structure, both in terms of phrases and the wider structure that the piece has been written in, which obviously directly corresponds to the style that they've been written in as well. But also it's their ability to play with that consistency of style. So their consistency of approach, demonstrating the 4 assessment criteria: command of instrument, sync or pulse, accuracy and understanding, and style and expression. And all of those require an understanding of the piece of music they're playing, but also a technical facility. So like with debut, the key signature for this arrangement of Jupiter is in F and the F major scale, played hands separately at this stage, but slightly faster BPM than for debut. But you can see direct relationship between the scale and the excerpt here, F major, and of course you've got G major as well, which is the sharp key equivalent. Let's have a listen to this arrangement now. And that's a neat cadence point to stop it at. You'll notice in all the excerpts we've heard so far that the exemplar audio has been deliberately played without pedal. Pedaling is not something that we're looking to assess, particularly at level 1. It can be incorporated as long as it's appropriate to the style, but is not a requirement. A number of the pieces have no pedal markings written in at all, because it's up to you and the student to decide how the pedal needs to be used, along with other articulations to put across the right accuracy and style and expression. However, there are pedal markings that have been incorporated where it's necessary to portray a particular intention of, say, the composer, or that's relevant to the style of music. This is one example This is Jasmine Flower, which is a very famous folk tune, which has been worked many times in a range of different contexts and used as a basis for improvisation all over the place. It's a great route to look at the interpretation and improvisation section of the technical skills, but also a direct correlation between the melody of this piece of music and the pentatonic scales. And you can see I've put the pentatonics that need to be played for the technical exercises on the right hand side. And you can see that at the penultimate bar here, there's the opportunity for the student to play that pentatonic scale, the D pentatonic, in its complete form, but freely to put across their own sense of style. And you'll also hear really interesting use of pedal here in the third and fourth bar and the seventh and eighth bar, where the pedal is held down to create the sense of harmonics and also to really let the resonance of the piano to create these harmonics as well. And it's a very interesting 21st century performance device employed by composers, and it's great that students can listen to that. Let's have a listen. And just for the sake of getting through everything in the time available, I'll cut it off there and we can have a look at the technical exercises just as a nice summary, really, of the scales and arpeggios that need to be employed. These are summarised quite nicely. In fact, they're listed in full on our website, which you'll be able to look at sort of from tomorrow morning. But the scales and arpeggios listed there. And then, of course, examples of the technical studies, just so you can see the evolution from debut into grade one. Slightly more complicated, but still only really focused on simple triads in basic inversions, and of course some lovely melodic figurations here, where you've got the right and the left hand demonstrating they're able to play with a range of articulations that shows their ability to kind of play broken chord style figures. Worth mentioning as well that when you get hold of the syllabus materials, the technical studies also come with exemplar audio, so students can hear what they should sound like as well as see them. Let's now have a look at grade 2. Nice range of composers, hopefully you'll agree. And you can see there's a theme where there are some composers that appear more than once because they're particularly interesting composers, they're particularly valuable composers for students to get to know as they explore and develop their own musical voice. But you can see Mozart and Beethoven included here. The classic, very popular, one of the most downloaded tunes I think and listened to hugely on YouTube is River Flows in You by Yeremar. This is a specific arrangement, so it's simplified for grade 2 and also shortened a little bit. And then you've also got Henry Mancini and Nicky Illes, both writing very much in a jazz style. We've also seen Alexis French, who we mentioned on Monday, and we'll hear some more of his stuff in a minute or two. But let's have a look at Fürlies, Beethoven, very well-known piece of music, obviously. You will find that this piece does actually appear in other syllabuses at grade 5. In its complete form, the third section that appears, it does actually elevate this piece to a grade 5 standard. What we've done is created an arrangement that removes that section. We'll play all of it so you can hear exactly what students have required. So the very famous bit that's written on the page, and then the slightly less famous bit that happens afterwards that is built around arpeggios. Because it's grade 2, we're now looking at 2 sharps and flats for the tech exercises. Obviously, this piece of music it's in A minor, but we've already learned about A minor. But the simple time signatures are there. Dynamics and articulation start to feature in the stylistic awareness. You can see that we've got slurs written into the score, things like poco written, our tempo put in as well, to show that students need to kind of start to play around with the tempo a little bit. And those of you that are familiar with the contemporary rock school piece and the fact they're playing pieces and the fact they're playing onto a backing track, and there's also click tracks, that is not something that is required for RSL Classical, and the sync or pulse side of things in the assessment criteria is about a student's ability to play with their own sense of internal pulse. And obviously that does give them the opportunity to pull in those elements of rubato that you want to be able to include when you're working with these sorts of pieces of music. You can see as well the quicker hand position changes, and there's more interaction and coordination between the hands required. And you'll find in other pieces of music as well, there's the introduction of kind of extended harmonies, but we're still really talking about triads. Let's have a listen. There you go. And of course, this section built on E minor, and then the second section built on A minor, both of which are keys which students will have explored previously when they were looking at debut and grade one. Very obviously, that one there, you can get lots of source recordings, but they'll have lots of use of pedal. And this is one where you can see what we're looking for really by having that really a nice legato flavour, but without the use of the pedal to show the movement, particularly in the left hand, the A motion there being nice and smooth, and the pedal not being a way of kind of fudging technique, if you like. Let's have a look at Together at Last. This is by Alexis French, very, very interesting composer, very well respected, recognised as a virtuoso from really quite a young age, attended the Purcell School of Music and the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and now writes music that combines his love of Western classical tradition with roots and R&B. So you'll find lots of really interesting things in his music, very typical of kind of 21st century, what was called postmodern, or basically return to tonal music, flowing melodies, and then lots of things inspired by the minimalist era, which obviously was what grew up in the kind of the 50s and 60s with the likes of John Adams, Philip Glass, and Steve Reich, and there's some Michael Nyman later on as well, which obviously is firmly in that tradition. So it's a bit of a nice running theme that goes through. This piece of music is from his 2018 album, designed to create Christmas cheer. So hopefully you'll enjoy listening to this while also looking at the appropriate sort of grade 2 level of demand that this piece warrants. And hopefully you'll have been able to hear there as well the use of that kind of that repetitive motif or riff, which means that students can kind of engage with it quite quickly, hear it, and then see how it's kind of embedded elsewhere in the piece. And that references quite nicely actually to our contemporary rock school syllabus, where you'll find there are pop tracks that have got kind of like a repeating verse chorus structure, and the phrases in the verse will be built around a couple of simple phrases, but will have been embellished slightly on repetition to cater for the, for the way the piece of music develops. And that was an example of how that also happens in classical music, and is a very crucial kind of long-term learning point, really, when students are starting to move from being able to talk directly by their teacher to, as they get more and more advanced, kind of doing their own independent learning as well. Just want to highlight and give you a visual representation of the Cheshire Cat. So this is Nikki Illes, who's she graduated from the Royal Academy of Music and the Leeds College of Music, is well known as a teacher and senior lecturer and a coach. This piece of music is taken from her Piano Tales for Alice, 16 pieces of music, all inspired by characters in Alice in Wonderland. And this is a lovely kind of jazz track representing the Cheshire Cat. There seems to be this thing where cats seem to always be accompanied by kind of jazzy music, like they're stealthily kind of walking around, just being cool, I suppose. Maybe that's where it comes from. But the left hand, with its descending pattern, sets up a really nice steady bass line, which you find gives the root in which the right hand can then experiment with a much more light, syncopated, swing style melody, all around the D minor blues scale. So if you look back at the D minor pentatonic, which students need to be able to engage with, the blues scale is simply the pentatonic with the addition of a flat 5, and right, yes, and the so they're able to kind of use the pentatonic scales and their technical exercises and incorporate them into their piece of music, which cross, of course, both jazz, Western classical, and contemporary styles. Now going to move on for the sake of time, just to give you a little visual representation of the grade 2 tech exercises. You can see there, left-hand side, that it's all the scales you'd expect, the ones that have got 2 sharps and flats in their key signature, B flat and D, with their relative minors, both in natural harmonic and melodic. Just a reminder that the scales and arpeggios at grade 1 upwards need to be played from memory, but the technical exercises, obviously you have the book, you take that into the exam with you, and you need to be able to select one of these to play these, to demonstrate that you've got the kind of technical facility to cope. And you can see that there's a strong coherence between the tech studies and the pieces that we've heard as well. Let's now take the last sort of 3-4 minutes to look at grade 3. Another little overview of the pieces of music. You've got Haydn, Sanson in there. We'll finish by playing the gorgeous piece by Johansson, A Model of the Universe from the Theory of Everything. Lovely example of 21st century minimalist writing. But you've also got Bartok, Lexis French, Christine Donkin, Clementi, Nikki Illes again, and Teresa Rickard. So a really representative sample, both historically and socially. So let's have a look at this piece of music, which I've chosen specifically. Apart from that, it's quite fun, but it's also really well known. Another example where you can send the student to go and listen to the orchestral version. This is quite a well-known arrangement of The Elephant from Saint-Saëns' Carnival of the Animals, like Jupiter, written in that romantic era style of program music. And this is evoking the feeling of an elephant, of course, dancing a can-can or doing some ballet. So it's got this nice slow down tempo, but the melody is in the left hand, which is quite cool. So you've got the right hand being able to play the chords and left hand being able to play the melody, which is slightly unusual. Because it's grade 3, we've got a more advanced time signature. So we've got 3/8. You can see there the 3 sharps and flats as well, because we're in E flat major. And you'll notice that there's a bit more technical facility required. Left hand playing these semiquaver movements of an allegretto tempo, for example. and there's good interaction and coordination between the hands. The right hand being able to play these nice chords in the right place, and there's slightly more advanced chords, and there's therefore sort of slightly quicker hand movements required. And you can see the bass line as well, kind of the bass line melody requires a fair bit of movement from the left hand, but still pretty firmly based on those basic scale and broken chord figurations that you see in the tech exercises. Let's have a listen. And like so many pieces, you'll find that there's the recapitulation of the A section. So you've got that ternary form with the middle section showing off the candidate's ability to kind of change style and change key. And you see it got a little bit more chromatic, as you might expect for something written when Sanson wrote that piece of music, and obviously included at grade 3 because of that kind of developed sense of style and facility to be able to adjust key and playing style kind of halfway through a piece, but at an expected point. Let's now look at Bartók. As I mentioned before, incorporates a lot of folk tunes into his music, fascinated with ethnomusicology and preserving the folk music of Hungary, whilst incorporating sort of Western classical harmonies and accompaniment figures. So this has been selected because Bartók is a composer of real interest, but not one necessarily that students of this sort of age or level would automatically think of engaging with. So we felt this was quite a nice piece of music to introduce him to a kind of a wider audience. You can see there's slightly more advanced requirements in terms of the chords as well. And finally, I think we'll look at Joseph Haydn's Allegro. This is a first suite from Divertimento in G major. Really, really great example of Haydn's evolution of taking Baroque dance suites and playing them on harpsichord and then piano to sort of evolve both the classical sonata form and the classical sonata as a musical concept, where music moved away from just being music to accompany dances and these big sort of palace balls, but music just to be sat and listened to and enjoyed. What you can see here in terms of the technical demands is the left hand playing kind of the classical Alberti bass sort of formation, although simplified somewhat, and then which is thrown over in the right hand. So again, the left hand and the right hand need to move between playing melody and harmony. 3/8, but a relatively straightforward key signature. So the increased technical demand is kind of offset, I suppose, by the slightly more straightforward key signature. Having an evenness of touch is really quite important there. Oh, and Witches and Wizards. Let's take a moment to look at this. This is Christine Donkin from Canada, a very well-known and well-respected pedagogue of music. So this piece of music, as you would expect for music that's kind of referencing music from the Romantic era, that it's telling a particular story, really giving students the opportunity to portray this idea of witches and wizards. You can see 6/8. Interestingly, how the right hand needs to move between the bass clef and the treble clef, and then the movement, the interaction between the hands really demonstrated in these segments here, in bars sort of 15, 16, where you've got the left hand and the right hand working together. Let's have a quick listen to this one. A nice short piece, but lots of things to get involved with there. Not at least this great example of where the pedalling has been put in, because it's very important part of the stylistic portrayal of this piece of music, and really helps with the left hand moving from underneath the right hand to over the top. A nice little technique to start developing, and you can see it's got really quite a technical flavour to it, and sort of represents Christine Donkin's sort of desire to write music that is appropriate for particular levels of ability. So really wanted to include that in the syllabus. Quick overview of the technical exercises. There you can see the 3 sharps and flats, again following the natural harmonic, melodic and pentatonic flavour, again echoed with the arpeggios, and then the technical studies. A nice little example of what needs to be done there, and another step up. You can see again these triplet movement, actually really nicely linked to the Witches and Wizards piece we've just heard. Just want to take a second to flag up the resources that we have available. So when you get the syllabus book in digital form, you can also get Replay, which is our interactive sheet music player. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it essentially gives you the opportunity to loop sections. And what's great when you're working with the piano is you can mute one part. You can mute the audio of one part, but have it playing on the screen. You can also play the right hand. You can practice the right hand whilst the whilst the left hand is playing. So you can sort of see how the parts interact with each other. You can adjust the tempo, you can adjust the score view. You can have the piano roll written underneath. The learning platform has a similar functionality, but with the learning platform, if you have an active teacher registry profile, you can access all of the music exam syllabus materials across a number of the instruments, and it will shortly be available for classical piano. You also get all the technical exercises as well, and you also have the ability to link student accounts to your account, so you can set exercises, have class lists, and really the aim is there to help you and students to engage with their learning both during lessons but also between lessons as well, by looking at the kind of the homework tasks you're setting them. Want to take a moment as well, just before we end this session, to flag up something that Alistair mentioned earlier, which is our current exam availability. Very excited to be able to offer the opportunity for any student that's been working on their classical piano pieces. They can take an exam and be certificated this side of Christmas, either through the performance certificate by playing all 5 pieces from any other UK board, or 3 pieces and then downloading our tech exercises from the website and preparing those. They can then enter for their exam between the 4th and the 20th of December. We can also you can also submit video submissions, and you can also arrange, if you're in the UK, for us to come and do a private exam visit face to face. The facility for using pieces from any other exam board is actually going to be in place until the end of 2021, and we will, of course, throughout 2021 be organising exam periods across spring, summer and winter, and you can have classical piano entered alongside contemporary pieces in rock school exams as well. Let me just leave you with these links, which will take you to both the repertoire list tech exercise and the syllabus. Show you how to join the free teacher registry to get hold of the learning platform, and if you're in the UK, where you can find your nearest public exam centre, information on how to enter via video submission, and for any other inquiries or to organise a private exam visit, you can contact business@rslawards.com in the UK and international@rslawards.com or your local rep for anything else.